Snow fell like a hush over the prairie, each flake drifting slowly, as though the heavens themselves wished to soften the earth's sharp edges. The station lantern sputtered in the wind, its glow small against the endless whiteness, and there she stood, Maribel Hayes, only 18, shawl too thin, fingers raw from clutching it closed. Her breath rose in little clouds that vanished almost as soon as they appeared, and with them seemed to vanish every assurance she had ever been given. She had been told she was too young for love, too unformed, too small, too foolish to be a wife. The words of her stepfamily had clung to her skin like frost, biting deeper each time she tried to shake them away. Tonight, those same words echoed in the cold voices of strangers, as they watched her with sidelong glances and whispered into their scarves. "Child has no business standing here," Elias Boone muttered as he latched the door of his store. His wife, Sarah, lingered a moment longer, her face softer, though still shadowed with worry. "Best go home, girl. Ain't fit for one like you." Their boots crunched on the frozen ground as they vanished into the night, leaving Maribel with silence and shame for company. Jonas Pike came last from the saloon, his breath carrying the sharp sting of whiskey. He leaned against the post, a grin pulling at his lips, cruel as a winter wind. "Still waiting, are you? Thought some fine rancher might claim you? You're a child in ribbons, nothing more. No man worth salt would waste his name on you." He tipped his hat as though the insult were a favor, and strode into the night, spurs jangling. Her cheeks burned hotter than the lantern's flame. She wanted to answer, to say that she had more heart than all their shallow words combined, but the lump in her throat held her silent. Tears blurred her eyes. The station bench loomed behind her, but she could not sit, could not be still under the weight of their laughter. So she turned, shawl flying loose, and fled into the open snow. The prairie was wide and white, a page unwritten, but Maribel felt herself only a blot of ink upon it. Wind bit her face, tugged her hair from beneath her bonnet, yet she pressed on. Better to be swallowed by the storm than to hear again that she was too young, too small, too foolish. Each step broke the crust of ice beneath, crunching out a rhythm like a heart that wanted to stop. Her tears froze before they fell. She stumbled against a drift and pressed her hands into the snow, the cold searing as though the world itself desired to erase her. She whispered broken, "I am too young for love." Saying it aloud was worse than hearing it, for now it belonged to her voice, not theirs. The silence after was immense. Then, another sound. A step. Slow, deliberate, heavier than her own. Her breath caught. Out of the white gloom, a figure emerged. At first she thought the storm had shaped a statue of a man, so tall and broad he seemed part of the earth itself. Snow clung to his black hair, to the scars that lined his shoulders. He wore no shirt, only rawhide trousers, his chest bare against the storm as though the cold feared him. His eyes, dark and steady, fixed on her with a weight that stripped every lie she had been told. Maribel scrambled back, heart hammering. "Stay away," she whispered, though her voice barely carried. The man did not move closer. He simply stood, snow swirling about him, his breath calm where hers faltered. For a long moment, the world held its breath. Then his lips parted, and his voice, low as a drum, carried across the stillness. "Don't be afraid." The words were simple, but they struck her like fire in frozen hands. She had braced herself for cruelty, for claim, for danger. Instead, she was met with gentleness, unexpected and steady. His tone carried no demand, no hunger, only a quiet assurance that unsettled her more than threats might have. Her chest rose and fell quickly, shawl slipping to the snow. She meant to reach for it, but her hands trembled too much. The man stepped forward once, slow enough for her to flee if she wished, and stooped to lift the shawl. He shook the snow from it, then held it out, not touching her, not forcing, only offering. Maribel's throat ached. She stared at the shawl, then at him. His eyes held nothing of mockery, nothing of the town's scorn. They were deep, unreadable, yet kind. Slowly, she reached out and took the shawl, her fingers brushing the warmth of his hand for only an instant. The touch jolted her, not with fear but with a strange steadiness, as though the storm itself had hushed to allow it. He said nothing more, only watched her as she wrapped the shawl about her shoulders. She wanted to ask who he was, why he was here in the snow with no shirt, how he did not shiver. But her tongue felt too heavy. She could only stand, breathing unevenly, feeling for the first time that perhaps she was not so invisible after all. The wind shifted, carrying faint echoes of laughter from the town behind her. Jonas's jeer, Elias's mutter. Her shame threatened to rise again. Yet here in the gaze of this stranger it faltered. She was not mocked. She was not dismissed. She was simply seen. The man inclined his head, a gesture of respect that felt older than words. Then, softer than before, his voice reached her again, low and unhurried. "You'll be happy with me." Her heart stopped, then surged so suddenly she swayed. She did not know this man, did not know his name, yet in the frozen silence of the prairie, the words wrapped her more securely than any shawl. She wanted to deny them, to say she was too young, too foolish, unworthy, but the storm seemed to hold those words at bay. She stood trembling, snowflakes catching in her lashes, the echo of his whisper burning in her ears. For the first time, the phrase she had carried like a curse, "Too young for love," wavered, uncertain, as if the storm itself were rewriting her fate. And as the night deepened, Maribel realized she could not turn back to the station, nor to the town's judgment. Not now, not after those words. She had stepped into the snow as a girl branded foolish. She now stood on its edge, heart pounding with fear and possibility, before a man whose silence spoke more than all the world's cruel laughter. The storm thickened, closing them in. His gaze did not falter. Her breath caught as she wondered. Was this danger, or was this the beginning of something she had been told she was too young to deserve? The answer waited in the falling snow. The wind drove harder, as though the storm itself meant to chase her back to the town's judgment. Yet when the tall Comanche turned and gestured with the faint tilt of his head, Maribel found her feet following. His stride was long, steady, each step certain across the drifts. She stumbled often, boots sinking, shawl clutched tight, but each time she faltered his presence ahead drew her forward, a figure carved against the snow, unbending, unafraid. No words passed between them. The hush of the storm carried only the sound of her breath, quick and shallow, and the crunch of his moccasins against ice. When fear rose in her throat, she thought of Jonas's smirk, Elias's dismissal, the cruel chorus that branded her too young for love. Better to follow this stranger into the white unknown than return to their scorn. At last, dim orange flickered through the veil of snow. A cabin appeared, crouched low against the wind, logs dark with age, smoke trailing faintly from the chimney. He lifted the latch and held the door wide. Heat breathed out, carrying the smell of wood smoke and venison stew. Maribel hesitated on the threshold, heart racing. A cabin in the wilderness was a place of danger, or a place of mercy. His eyes met hers, steady, unreadable. He spoke only one word. "Come." She crossed into warmth. The room was spare. A heavy table, furs layered before the fire, shelves of dried herbs and clay jars. Snow melted from her bonnet, dampening her hair. She shivered, clutching the shawl close, though the heat began to sting her frozen fingers. He closed the door behind them. The storm muffled at once, as though another world had shut its mouth. He moved without hurry, setting a pot closer to the flames, ladling broth into a wooden bowl. Steam curled into the air. He set it before her, not demanding she sit, only waiting. Maribel sank onto the bench, legs weak. Her hands shook so much the spoon clattered against the rim. Without a word he reached, steadying the bowl with one broad hand, his knuckles scarred, skin browned by sun. "Embarrassed," she whispered. "Thank you," though she was unsure if he understood her tongue. His gaze did not waver. He nodded once, a gesture of respect rather than ownership. She sipped the broth, warmth sliding through her, loosening the knot of cold that had bound her chest. The silence between them was strange, yet not cruel, not mocking. In town, silence meant judgment, whispers behind her back. Here, silence was shelter. She found herself breathing slower. When the bowl was empty, he placed a fur-lined blanket about her shoulders. The weight startled her, not for its touch but for the quiet care in the act. He could have left her with her thin shawl, could have turned his back, but he had not. Maribel's throat tightened. She whispered, almost to herself, "I don't understand why." For the first time, something shifted in his expression. A flicker of softness across eyes that had seen more winters than hers. His voice was deep, careful. "Because you were cold." Her heart clenched. She had expected some claim, some reminder that she was alone, helpless, young. But he spoke as though the answer needed no further meaning, as if mercy itself were reason enough. She studied him in the firelight. Shadows traced his muscles, the rise of his chest as he breathed, the scar across his collarbone. He was unlike any man she had known. No polished boots, no sly words, no hunger in his stare. He seemed instead carved from silence, from earth, from storms. And yet, she felt her shame loosening, thread by fragile thread, under his regard. Still, fear lingered. She turned her face toward the flames, whispering again, "I'm too young for love." The words felt pitiful now, small against the crackle of wood. She thought he would ignore her. Instead, he answered, voice quiet but certain, "You are not too young to be safe." Her eyes stung. All her life, safety had been fragile, shattered by ridicule, stolen by men who saw only what she lacked. Now, in a cabin she had entered with trembling steps, she heard the word given back to her as though it belonged. She wanted to weep with relief, but pride kept her chin high. The storm raged outside. He set another log on the fire, sparks leaping. Then he sat across from her, folding his arms loosely, gaze never pressing, only waiting. It struck her that he asked nothing of her. No story, no promise. The quiet stretched not as a demand, but as an invitation. Hours passed. The fire sank lower, shadows rising on the log walls. Her eyelids grew heavy, but fear pricked her whenever she leaned too far into rest. As though sensing this, he spread furs near the hearth and stepped back, indicating with a nod. He himself settled by the door, leaning against the wall, eyes closing though his posture remained alert, as if keeping guard. The gesture broke something in her. No man in town had ever offered her safety without price. Here, a stranger asked nothing but gave everything. Her chest ached with confusion, with something dangerously close to hope. She lay down upon the furs, warmth cradling her, the crackle of fire soft as a lullaby. Yet her thoughts swirled. Why had he carried her from the storm? Why had he spoken those words, "You'll be happy with me"? What did he see in her that others refused to? Sleep dragged at her, but before darkness claimed her, she heard it again. His whisper, deep and low, meant only for the fire, not for her ears. "You'll be happy with me." Her eyes snapped open. He had not known she still lingered at the edge of waking. The words were not command but promise, spoken with a quiet certainty that shook her to the bone. Maribel lay frozen beneath the furs, heart thundering. She had told herself she was too young, unready, unworthy. Yet in the hush of the cabin, in the steady voice of the man by the door, the phrase began to crumble. Could happiness truly be given, not stolen? Could love come not in declarations, but in the silence of a man who kept watch while she slept? The storm wailed outside. She clutched the blanket tighter, torn between fear and a yearning she had never dared to name. His words lingered in the firelight, binding her more tightly than the shawl he had placed around her shoulders. And in that moment, half hidden in shadow, Maribel knew she could not simply walk away when dawn broke. The whisper would follow her, echoing louder than all the town's cruel laughter. The storm eased at last, leaving a white silence stretched across the prairie, so bright under morning sun that it hurt the eyes. Maribel woke to that brilliance spilling through the cabin window, the fire reduced to embers. Talon Blackbear had risen before her, already outside cutting wood, each strike of the axe a clean rhythm against the hush. She lingered a moment, watching his back, the strength in his shoulders, the steadiness of his movements. He belonged to the land in a way she never had. Yet when he returned, carrying a split log under each arm, his gaze rested on her with a gentleness that suggested she belonged here more than in any town. Days blurred into a rhythm of survival. Snow fell again, then melted, then hardened to ice. She learned how to stack wood without dropping it, how to stir broth and season it with dried sage from his shelves. He showed her where the traps were set, how to free a rabbit without cruelty. In turn she mended a shirt with stitches small and neat, her needle flashing in firelight. Their words were few, but every gesture grew heavy with meaning, filling the silences with something warmer than speech. Still, fear whispered at the edges of her thoughts. She was too young, she reminded herself at night. Too foolish to believe she might have a place in the strength of such a man. And yet each morning, when he set her share of food before her without word, the shame loosened further. It was not long before necessity pressed her to face the town. Supplies had dwindled. Flour, salt, kerosene were needed. When Talon readied his horse, she gathered her shawl, though dread churned in her stomach. He glanced at her, eyes questioning, but when she lifted her chin he gave a single nod. They rode in silence, snow crunching under hooves. As the town rose before them, the stillness of the prairie shattered into murmurs. Men paused at the smithy, women lowered their voices outside the store. Jonas Pike stood leaning at the saloon's post, grin spreading as though he had been waiting for this sight. Maribel's cheeks burned as she dismounted. She felt every eye upon her, every whisper stitching shame into her skin. Elias Boone, the storekeeper, stepped out, his voice sharp with disapproval. Maribel Hayes. You've gone and thrown your name into the fire, running with him. No good can come. Sarah Boone's voice was gentler, though no less wounding. Child, you don't know what you do. Come home with us. There's still time. Maribel wanted to vanish. Her throat closed, words trapped. Talon said nothing, only stood by, broad and unmoved, letting the town's scorn break itself upon his silence. She longed to hide behind him, yet knew that if she did, their whispers would turn to mockery, that she was helpless, that she had been taken. So she forced her legs forward into the store, lifting her head though her heart quaked. Inside, she gathered the goods with trembling hands. Coins clinked against the counter. She expected Elias to refuse them, but he took them stiffly, eyes hard. You've chosen, girl, he muttered. Don't cry when the choosing ruins you. Her vision blurred. She pressed the bag of flour to her chest and left without answer. Outside, Jonas stepped into her path. Little dove, he said with mocking sweetness. Does he speak for you? Or do you speak at all? Maybe you've forgotten how. Her shame erupted into hot tears. She turned away, but before she could move, Talon stepped between them. He did not raise his voice, only looked down at Jonas with a calm that chilled. For a moment Jonas blustered, but under the Comanche's steady gaze his grin faltered. He spat in the snow and stalked back to the saloon, muttering curses. That night, in the safety of the cabin, Maribel broke. Her voice cracked as she whispered, They're right. I'm nothing but a foolish girl. Too young. Too weak. I can't walk into town without their scorn swallowing me whole. Tears slipped hot down her cheeks. Talon listened, silent, then moved closer. He did not tell her she was wrong. Instead, he knelt before her where she sat, lifting her trembling hand and pressing it to his chest, against the steady thud of his heart. His eyes held hers, dark and unyielding. The gesture said more than words. Your weakness does not frighten me. You are not unseen. The firelight blurred through her tears. She wanted to believe him, wanted to feel that strength seep into her bones. For the first time she whispered not denial but a question. Why me? His voice was low, certain. Because you are cold. And because you are more than they see. Her breath caught. Something inside her shifted, small but irrevocable. Shame loosened another thread. Winter pressed hard in the days that followed. They worked together, hauling water, chopping wood, mending torn hides. Once, when she slipped on ice and fell, he reached her in a stride, lifting her with such care that she felt no humiliation, only safety. Another evening, she sat sewing as he whittled wood, and when her thread tangled, he wordlessly untied the knot with hands used to weapons, not needles. These were not grand gestures, but they stitched something deeper than she dared name. Old Ruth, the midwife, visited one dusk, trudging through snow with herbs in her basket. She eyed Maribel, then Talon, then the small, homely signs of a life shared. Child, she said quietly when Talon stepped outside to fetch wood. Love don't come with years. It comes with storms. You'll learn the difference. The words lingered long after Ruth left, echoing in the hush of night. Maribel touched the fur at her shoulders, and thought perhaps the old woman saw something she herself could not yet admit. But peace was fragile. In the saloon, Jonas Pike's bitterness festered. Men drank deep and muttered that the settler girl was stolen, that she needed rescuing. By the third week, Jonas was gathering them with promises of putting things right, of teaching the Comanche his place. The gossip thickened like ice before a thaw, sharp and ready to break. Maribel did not yet know this. She only sensed unease in the way the air grew heavier when Talon returned from town, his silences longer, his gaze sharper toward the horizon. One evening as the snow fell thin and fine, she asked, "What is it?" He paused, then set the axe aside, his voice low. "Storm is not always in the sky." Her blood chilled. She understood then, that the scorn she carried like a stone was no longer only whispers. It was sharpening into something far more dangerous. The night had turned brittle with cold, stars glittering above like shards of glass. Inside the cabin, the fire glowed steady, casting long shadows that trembled on the log walls. Maribel sat close, sewing by its light, though her hands moved slower than usual. A heaviness pressed upon her. Talon's silence had deepened over the past days, his gaze often sliding toward the door, toward the horizon, as though listening for something she could not yet hear. When the first knock came, sharp against the wooden frame, her needle froze mid-stitch. Talon rose, shoulders tightening. A second knock followed, louder, then voices muffled but harsh. Jonas Pike's drawl carried clear through the timber. "Come out, Black Bear. We know she's in there. Time's come for her to choose, before you steal her whole." Maribel's breath caught. Fear gripped her chest, but beneath it a smaller flame of defiance flickered. She had known this storm would come. Jonas's eyes in town had promised it. Still, her body trembled as Talon opened the door. The cold rushed in, carrying snowflakes that swirled like sparks. Beyond the threshold stood Jonas with half a dozen men, lanterns casting a sickly glow across their faces. Some held rifles, though loosely, more for show than readiness. The snow crunched under their boots, the night air sharp with whiskey and anger. Talon stepped forward, bare-chested, the fire's light behind him, the storm's chill before him. He did not raise his voice. "Leave." Jonas barked a laugh, though it rang hollow. "Not until she speaks. Girl, you'll tell us yourself. Was it your choosing to run with him? Or are you held here like a prize stag in a snare?" His eyes gleamed cruel. "We'll have the truth before the town tonight." Maribel's legs weakened. Every gaze pressed upon her like a weight, waiting for her shame to confirm their judgment. She thought of her stepfamily's words, of Elias's scorn, of Sarah's pity. All of them had carved into her the same refrain. Too young, too foolish, unworthy. The urge to hide behind Talon surged hot in her blood. But Talon did not speak for her. He only looked back at her, eyes steady, silent as always, as if to say, "Your voice or none at all." Her breath trembled. She stepped into the doorway, shawl pulled tight, snow stinging her cheeks. Faces shifted in the lantern glow, expectant, hungry for her failure. Jonas smirked, certain. "I thought I was too young for love," she said, her voice breaking but carrying. "And I let your words chain me. But love is not about years, it is about safety. About being seen." Her chin lifted though tears blurred her sight. "Here I am not mocked. Here I am not invisible. Here I am safe." The silence that followed was heavier than the snow. Some men shifted uneasily, eyes darting away. Jonas's smirk faltered. "You think safety comes with a savage?" He spat. "He'll cast you aside when he's done. And you'll come crawling back begging." Her tears burned colder now. "Better to stand in a storm with him than rot in the warmth of your cruelty." A murmur ran through the group. Ruth's voice rose from behind them. The old midwife had followed, her lantern steady, her gaze stern. "Shame on you all," she said. "Shame to drag a child into the snow to tear her dignity apart. The girl has chosen. Let her choice be." Jonas's fury twisted. His hand shot out, grabbing Maribel's arm as though to drag her from the threshold. In the same instant Talon moved. His grip closed on Jonas's wrist, iron and unyielding, wrenching it free with a force that sent the man stumbling. The crowd gasped as Jonas reached for his knife, but before steel cleared its sheath, Talon struck. Swift, controlled, not to kill but to disarm. The blade skittered into the snow. They circled in the lantern glow, breath steaming, boots grinding ice. Jonas lunged, but Talon sidestepped, his strength coiled and precise. Blow after blow fell useless against him, until at last Talon caught Jonas by the collar, and drove him into the snow. His fist hovered, heavy with the power to end it, yet he did not strike. He looked instead into Jonas's eyes, his silence louder than rage. Then he released him, letting the man sprawl in the drift, pride more broken than bone. The men muttered, shame softening their bluster. One by one, lanterns lowered. Ruth's gaze pinned them, daring any to resist. None did. They scattered into the night, leaving Jonas kneeling in defeat, snow staining his breath. Talon turned back toward the cabin. His chest rose and fell, not with fury but with calm resolve. Maribel stood trembling, tears frozen on her cheeks, shawl slipping loose. When he reached her, she clutched his arm, not from fear but from something deeper. Recognition, perhaps, or the certainty that she would not walk alone again. The fire behind them crackled, the snow beyond whispered, but within her something louder stirred. She had spoken before the town, not hidden, not coward. She had claimed her voice, even as it shook. And he had answered cruelty not with slaughter, but with mercy. Still, as she leaned into him, heart pounding, she sensed it was not over. Jonas's eyes had burned with more than defeat. They had burned with promise of vengeance. The storm had broken upon the cabin, yes, but storms often gather again, fiercer, after their first howl. And as the door closed behind them, sealing them once more in the glow of fire and shadow, Maribel knew that the true test of her words, "Here I am safe," was yet to come. The morning came washed in gold, the storm spent, the world hushed and glittering as though nothing cruel had ever touched it. Sunlight fell across the drifts, turning the snow into rivers of fire. Inside the cabin, Maribel stirred from restless dreams to find Talon already awake, standing near the window, his profile cut against the light. He looked as though he belonged to that dawn, as though storms bowed to his stillness. Her body trembled with the memory of the night. The knock at the door, Jonas's hand on her arm, the fight in the snow. Shame had not claimed her this time, but courage had left her raw, exposed. She pulled the fur tighter around her shoulders and whispered, "They won't stop." He turned, eyes steady. "Storms return," he said simply, and yet in his tone was no despair, only readiness. He crossed to her and placed bread in her hands, the crust warm from the fire. The gesture was small, but her throat tightened. It was not the bread that undid her, but the quiet assurance that he saw her as someone worth feeding, worth keeping. The day passed in silence, broken only by work. She fetched water while he split wood, both moving with the rhythm of survival. Yet every so often her gaze caught his, and in those glances lay words unspoken. Gratitude, fear, something trembling near the edge of love. By evening, the weight of it pressed upon her so heavily, she could no longer hold it in. She set the bucket down by the hearth, water sloshing. "You should send me away," she said suddenly. Her voice cracked, though she kept her eyes firm. "The town won't forgive me, or you. I'll bring nothing but trouble to your door." Talon paused in sharpening his blade, the whetstone frozen in his hand. He studied her, long and unhurried, as though her words were stones he weighed before answering. At last, he set the knife aside and rose. Crossing the room, he stopped before her, so close she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. "You are not trouble," he said. His hand lifted, hovering near her cheek but not yet touching, waiting for her choice. Her breath shook. For so long she had been told she was too young, too weak, too foolish. But his gaze did not diminish her. It steadied her, carved out a place where she could stand unashamed. She leaned into his hand, and his palm cupped her face with a gentleness that made her knees weak. The door burst open before she could speak, the slam of wood against wall shattering the fragile moment. Jonas Pike stumbled in, face bloodied from the night before, rifle in his hands. His eyes were wild with fury, spit flecking his lips. "You'll not shame me twice," he snarled. "She's coming with me, or I'll burn this place to the ground." Maribel froze, fear choking her. Talon moved in front of her, broad frame a shield. His voice cut through the cabin, low and commanding. "Leave!" Jonas leveled the rifle, hands shaking with rage. The room pulsed with silence, firelight flickering against steel. Maribel's heart pounded, her body urging her to flee, but something inside her broke free instead. She stepped from behind Talon, voice trembling but loud enough to fill the cabin. "No, Jonas. I won't go with you. I won't go with anyone who sees me as less than I am." Her tears glistened but her chin lifted, eyes locked on him. "You called me too young, too foolish. But I know now. Love is not what you name it. It is what it gives. Safety, dignity, a place to stand." Jonas's face twisted, shame cutting deeper than fury. For a moment his finger tightened on the trigger. But Talon moved faster. His hand struck the barrel aside, sending the shot into the ceiling. Smoke filled the room, sparks of plaster raining down. With a single motion Talon wrenched the weapon away, and hurled it into the snow outside. Jonas staggered, fists raised, but Talon caught him, pinning him against the wall. The warrior's voice was thunder held on a leash. "You will not touch her again." For a heartbeat, it seemed he might end Jonas's life. His fist hovered, eyes burning. Then, with a slow exhale, he released him. Jonas collapsed into the snow outside, broken not by fists but by the mercy of being spared. He fled into the dawn, smaller than he had ever seemed. The cabin fell silent again, smoke curling toward the rafters. Maribel's body shook, her legs weak, but in her chest burned something fierce, something new. She turned to Talon, voice raw. "You could have killed him." Talon's gaze held hers, steady, unflinching. "Killing is easy. Protecting is harder. You deserve the harder thing." Her tears spilled, but they were not of shame. She reached for him then, not with fear but with certainty, her hand finding his chest, the thud of his heart strong beneath her palm. He covered her hand with his own, fingers rough, grip unyielding. No words were needed, yet he gave them all the same, his voice low, resonant. "You are mine, and I am yours. Not by force. By choice." The words broke her. She wept into his chest, all the weight of rejection and cruelty sliding from her shoulders. For the first time, she felt not too young, not too small, but enough. More than enough. When dawn rose again, they stood outside the cabin, Ruth waiting with her lantern, Sarah Boone behind her. Townsfolk gathered in uncertain quiet. Ruth's voice rang clear. "The girl has chosen. Let no man scorn her again." The townsfolk shifted, shame softening their faces. Sarah stepped forward, placing a loaf of bread into Maribel's hands, a gesture of quiet peace. There in the snow still glittering with morning light, Maribel and Talon stood side by side. He did not pull her forward, nor did she hide behind him. She lifted her chin, eyes shining, voice steady as she spoke. "This is where I belong." Ruth smiled, raising her hands in a blessing older than the town itself. The crowd murmured assent. And as vows were spoken softly between them, witnessed beneath the pale sky, Maribel felt the world shift. She was no longer the girl who whispered she was too young for love. She was a woman who had found it, earned it, and claimed it without shame. The snow fell again, gentle now, as though sealing the moment in white flame. Maribel looked at Talon, and he at her, the silence between them richer than any declaration. In that silence lay storms survived, judgments endured, and a future born of choice. And to those who might listen, she would say, "Love does not come when the world deems you ready. It comes when two souls, battered and bruised, dare to stand together against the storm. Perhaps, friend, that is the only age that matters at all."